Okay, here we go. Trying something brand new for the first time. Give me a few minutes. I'm gonna get this set up from my end. I hope. I don't know. Probably has the default template stuff. Oh, I have no idea what I'm doing. Bear with me. It should be smoother and should be synced. Oh, I need to mute that. Okay. Bear with me, guys. I'm sorry. I'm getting started. And I've never done this before from my phone directly. It clearly just copied my template instead of what I wanted to insert there. Okay. Okay, I think we're good. Open that up so I can see chat. Share a link. Okay, so here. Nice and in sync, as you can see, I hope. Oh God, I hope. The field of view is extra wide. It's kind of frustrating because my phone is like significantly closer to my desk. If I bring my hand this close, I hit the camera mount. There's like 4 inches of movement. Love it. I think YouTube is using the wrong camera because I have a S10e and there's like 3 camera lenses or some bullshit. Can you see that? Yeah. Nice, right? Anyway, why don't you have a giant quarter, Scratchy? Okay, I'm gonna give it a couple minutes, make sure everything's stable before I get started, and then we'll go ahead and get started. In the meantime, enjoy this lovely landscape here while I finish my drink. I mean, you can say it's the way an SP should be, but it's clearly a Game Boy Advance. And yes, that is a normal size quarter. I don't know what you're talking about. Boxy Pixel, please. This is premium stuff. So I did just update the description. If you're one of those people that care about the links in the description, you might have to refresh the page. But otherwise, I think we're good to go ahead and get started here. 4 minutes into the Jesus stream. But yeah, I was, just for some background, I was doing some measurements trying to get some new custom lenses made, and I only have 2 of these shells at the moment. One of them already has a custom lens on it. Didn't really want to take the lens off to make new measurements. And, I mean, I suppose I could have just taken the parts out of this one, but it's easier to just put this nonsense in here. Anyway. No, this is not a Boxy Pixel Heroxagon. This is my own very special, very unique design that is, in my humble opinion, way better than Boxy Pixels on account of it being, actually sleek and smooth. When you consider the size of an SP, look at that. But no, it's a Game Boy Advance SP, hence the SP motherboard in there. But it is what it is. Anyway, I think I can go ahead and get started now. I want to talk about something that is not exactly a Game Boy related topic, but is something that I think is tangentially related and extremely important to Game Boy modding, and that is soldering. Now, a lot of people who watch my channel are probably already familiar with how to solder, but I know a lot of people just in general aren't, and I have actually done a video on this before. It is linked in the description. If you clicked on this video when it went live, the description is not up to date, but it should be now if you refresh. But yeah, no, sorry, keep getting distracted. I'm really digging my custom SP, and I can see that quite a lot of you other people are. And just for context, here it is next to a DMG. It is quite a bit smaller. This is clearly not assembled, but it is it's about as thick as a stock SP on the back end. So there you go. Anyway, getting distracted. Sorry, reading chat. So what I often recommend to people who are just getting started in modding, keep getting me distracted. Yes, it is actually the same exact height as a Game Boy Pocket. I don't have one at my desk to compare, I think. No, I don't. It's the same height as a Game Boy Pocket. It's a little bit wider because it's the same width as a stock SP, but it's much thinner. I have pictures that I uploaded on my Reddit account. If you click on my YouTube channel, go to the About page, there's a link to my Reddit account. Click and see what I've submitted. There's a whole album in the most recent thread. You can scroll through that, but there's comparison pictures of probably this exact one, or not this one, but one of the 3D printed versions of it. Anyway, sorry. On to the whole point of the stream here. Game Boy modding. Soldering is a very important part of Game Boy modding. A lot of backlight kits, if they don't require soldering, Jesus, I can't even speak today. If they don't require soldering, it's still heavily recommended for at least brightness controls, or in the case of the Game Boy Pocket kits, you do still need to solder, or you can use the manufacturer recommended solution of just recommended. Sorry, I've apparently had a little bit too much of just taking the long wire and wrapping it around a battery terminal. But anyway, the whole point of that tangent here is instead of jumping into your $80 Game Boy project and learning how to solder on that, pick up a cheapo soldering kit, learn to solder on that. It's $3, and if you screw this up, you're out $3. That's it. And even then, even if you screw it up, you've still got in valuable practice, and you're more prepared for soldering on your Game Boy kit. Personally, I think soldering is easy. I've also been doing it for like 15 years at this point. So there are a lot of things that I do that are just basically second nature to me at this point. Whereas a lot of people picking up the hobby, they don't have the experience. They don't know what to do when X happens or whatever it is. So yeah, do yourself a favor. Heck, you can even buy like 2 or 3 of these things, and it's still cheaper, significantly cheaper than a backlight kit would be. And well, let's be honest. If you're doing like a Game Boy Color backlight kit or something, It's probably no big deal to just not have brightness control or Game Boy Advance or Game Boy Advance SP, whatever, it's fine. Most people, myself included, just use it on the default brightness, and that's fine. The default brightness just so happens to be a good level. Excuse me. But it's still a very... It's still a good skill to have. A lot of games themselves have batteries. This one is Pokemon Ruby in particular. The battery is... in this case, it is only used for the real-time clock circuit, and it is literally irrelevant to the rest of the function of the game. So if this battery dies, all you lose is your clock and any events that are based on the clock. So for the example of Pokemon Ruby, that means you can't grow berries anymore. I mean, it's... some people that's important. To most people, that's not at all important. But it's still a good skill to have, because there are a lot of people who their first project is they'll buy, you know, a $70 copy of Pokemon Emerald, and yes, that's about what they're going for right now, the legit versions. And their first time soldering, they'll try and replace the battery on it, and they'll tear up these pads. Now, that's neither here nor there, but again, $70, $3. So, yeah, recommend getting started on one of these. And that is my plan for today. This one in particular, I have 100% no idea what this is. I haven't even opened it yet. But let's see if I can't solder it together. The whole point of one of these kits is not that it works, it's that you get experience soldering, understand, you know, get a little bit more comfortable with your iron, so on and so forth. And if it works when all is said and done, then that's just a bonus on top of that. There is not a lipo mod for this kit, but there is zero reason that there can't be. No, I'm kidding. Well, that's not the point of this video. Okay, so I'm going to solder together with, instead of my usual soldering iron, I'm going to use my T80P here with my K-Series tip. Now, if I recall correctly, it comes with this tip here. If I can get this open. There we go. Which is one of these little conical tips. These work. They are the most generic all-purpose tips out there that I can think of. I don't like them. There are much better tips out there. For starters, I like either these wedge tips. I forget specifically what this one is. It says on the tip. I don't think this is focusing because I think we're on the wrong camera here. And I don't know how to change that through YouTube. Anyway, this says TSD25 FS38. I don't know which it is, but it's a wedge-shaped tip. It's shaped like a flathead screwdriver. There's also one of these guys, which I clearly haven't even used on this soldering iron. It's got an angled edge there. These things are really good for doing like these surface mount chips like this. And actually, honestly, this was my go-to general purpose tip for a long time until I picked up one of these, and this is my favorite general purpose tip. Sorry, again, I don't think the camera is focusing. That is just a downside to using the YouTube app. But anyway, I'm going to go with one of these. If you have the choice, I highly recommend getting one of these K-Series knife edge tips, or what I use on my other soldering iron right now is one of these J-Series tips that curves a little bit to the left, which is a totally normal problem and a totally normal situation, and I hear lots of people have that issue. Quirk. But anyway, yeah, I like these K-Series tips. A lot of people think, oh no, your tip is too big, you're gonna have a hard time getting in there, but that's not the point. Look at how pointy it is. All right, look, dude, it's curving to the left. Dun, dun, dun. Now it's curving to the right. Anyway, sorry, getting distracted again. I like these tips. They're, if you can get one for your soldering iron, I recommend it. But a lot of this sort of stuff comes down to personal preference. And again, this is the sort of video that I would show to beginners who don't exactly have a personal preference yet. So it is what it is. This is just my personal preference, and I like it. So that's what I'm going to use. Anyway, as I was saying, a lot of people don't like these tips because they think, oh, it's too big, you can't get in there and solder. Look at how pointy that thing is. You can get in there with just the tip if you want, but if you're not getting into a really tight space, there's this large flat beveled edge that gives you plenty of surface area to transfer plenty of heat. And that is important. Heat transfer is one of the most important things when it comes to soldering. And these conical tips that it comes with, this one right here, you can see I have used it a little bit because I was just playing around with it, but it's hard to get good contact with this type of tip because here's how you hold, more or less, here's how you hold it. You're holding the actual iron and not the tip itself. But if you try and, press down on something, you can see I'm only getting the palm of my hand with just the very tip. You have to come in at a really flat angle to actually get the side contact, to get the surface area, to transfer the heat, to melt the solder, and they work. Again, don't get me wrong, they're perfectly usable. There are just better tips, and that's why I like these, because they have that bevel on the edge there, or these chisel tips because they're nice and flat on top. Anyway, moving on. So this is the T80P or TS80P soldering iron. It is very commonly recommended in the soldering community, and for good reason, because it is a genuinely good soldering iron. It is not my personal preference as far as soldering irons come because it is a little bit pricier than some of the alternatives and doesn't have some of the same features. Now, my main soldering iron, and bear with me, I'm about to pull my camera out of the holster here. Or actually, no, I'm not, because I have documents over there and I don't want to dox myself. But my other soldering iron is just a Hacko clone here. You can pull the tip off if it's not too tight, which, oh, there it goes. You can see it uses completely different style tips. I like this one because the iron itself is cheaper. This thing ran me like 55 bucks. And the tips themselves are only like $5 or so. But it's nice because it comes with a stand, which is handy. When you put this down, you're just setting it down like that, and it can roll into things. I have messed that up before, and I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the Microsoft Trackball Explorer, but it is an old mouse from Microsoft that, look it up on eBay. It is not very cheap. I use one because I got it at a yard sale for a couple bucks. I had no idea what I got, but it was a really nice mouse, so I bought it, I used it, and then I looked up later what it's worth. Anyway, I've accidentally rolled my soldering iron into it before, and I have taken chunks out of it because it melts. I have done the exact same thing with this iron here. You can see there are still chunks of plastic stuck to the barrel there. Still haven't even cleaned it, but getting a soldering iron stand is important, I think. Otherwise, you just need to be extremely cognizant of where your iron is and where the cord coming out of the back of it is, because this is not a cordless soldering iron, it's just not plugged in. Another thing that's definitely recommended, one of these, excuse me, I keep burping, had entirely too much club soda. one of these brass sponge things. These are really good for cleaning the tip, getting all the nasty solder off. A lot of soldering irons come with a sponge. Like this is the sponge out of my Edson here. You can see it's literally just like a kitchen sponge. You wet it and then you can wipe your iron off on it. I don't like these sponges because I've read that they can cause thermal shock issues with the iron tip itself. Because when you think about it, when you're wiping this off, the iron itself is going to be around 300 degrees Celsius. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. This is soaked up with water, so when you're wiping it off, you're boiling the water away, and this is trying to cool your iron tip down to 100 degrees Celsius. That is a lot of stress on the tip itself, and I think long term that's not really going to be a good solution. I haven't used one of these in a very long time. I obviously still have one, but I don't use it. But I do have one of these brass sponges. I think they work just as good, and there's much less stress on the iron itself. So in my opinion, that is a good thing. And then last but not least, solder itself. Lately I've been using this KSGER, I think it's 6337, yeah, 6337. Again, sorry, it's out of focus. You can't really read that. But what this is 63% tin, 37% lead. And there's two different types of solder. There's lead-free and leaded. Well, there's more than that, but for electronics, there's two different types of solder. There's leaded and lead-free. The difference is if you're buying something pre-made, like for example a cell phone or a computer, that's going to be made with lead-free solder because legal mandates, yada yada yada. But if you're just a hobbyist, you're working at home, you're soldering together kits, just having fun, buy the leaded stuff. Trust me, you will have a much better time with the leaded stuff. It is so much easier to work with. It melts at such a lower temperature. It is much more forgiving. You will have a much better time with the leaded stuff. Now, oh no, Mako, lead is toxic. Well, then don't eat the stuff. It's fine. Trust me. You're not going to vaporize the lead with a soldering iron. These things don't get hot enough to do that. And if they do, well, then that's not a soldering iron. So you don't have to worry about it. Now, I'm spending a lot of time talking and not actually working on this kit. But bear with me. There's a point to this. I think. A lot of people recommend when they're to newbies just getting started soldering, oh, just take an old PCB from something that's broken, try soldering that, try desoldering components from that and soldering again. But if you're buying something made after like 2005 thereabouts, it's going to be with lead-free solder, which melts at a much higher temperature and is much more difficult to work with. So it's not the same at all if you're practicing on lead-free and then going to the leaded stuff. I highly recommend just starting with the leaded stuff and going from there because that's all you're going to be working with. If you do end up working on stuff with leaded solder, a lot of the time what you can do is you can just heat up the joint till it melts. It'll still probably melt even though it melts at a higher temperature. If your iron is at least 300 degrees, I don't think it should be a problem. But just, heat it up, add leaded solder to it. Just keep feeding it into the joint. And then, it's not good for the joint. But if you add enough solder and then remove the extra solder, then add enough solder, then remove the extra solder, then add enough solder, you'll have more leaded solder there than lead-free. And then you can work with it much easier. Anyway, I hope that made sense. I am trying to keep up with with chat this time. So if you have any questions, feel free to pipe up. I'll try and chime in there. Hazi, the X-Tronics holder on mine is broken, so I don't think... I'm sure it does, but mine is missing the plastic insert, and this iron, if you insert it, just falls all the way through. So I don't have a holder for this iron. I'll have to try and keep track. Anyway, I think it's time to go ahead and get started. So on the other end of this cable, I have a USB-C wall wart plugged in, and this will provide the power for this thing here. It should already be set up. We will go ahead and heat it up. Even though I definitely should have started by opening up this kit. That's fine. All right, so mine is set to 300 degrees, which is usually what I like soldering at. And see, soldering, my solder is melting noisily. Oh, one more thing I forgot to mention. It's probably worth getting yourself a fume extractor, because as you can see, when I add solder to this, I get all this smoke coming off. You don't want to breathe that in. That's not good to breathe in. I still don't have a fume extractor, so I'm going to do a what's called pro gamer move, and I'm going to open the window that's right there. Give me just a sec. Because I am even less prepared than I usually am. Anyway, this is nice and hot. I don't have a stand for it, so I'm going to set it right there and hope that I don't ruin anything. I'm just going to move this stuff. Alright. So this kit, if I recall correctly, is just a whole bunch of blinking lights. But still good stuff. This is the PCB you get. Nice, clearly labeled. Unfortunately, you can't tell because, again, the camera's still not focusing. Love it. And here are the instructions you get, which are not helpful whatsoever. Oh, well, okay. I can sort of make out what we need to do. So you can see here on the left, it has the components listed. I don't know what this means. I'm guessing this is just a description of the components, but it's literally in Chinese, and I don't know Chinese. On the right here, it's a description of the components. So I can see these first one, R2, R1, R3, and R4. The R stands for resistor, and this says 1K, so these must be 1000 ohm resistors. There's 4, so on and so on. D1 through D19, D stands for diode. Usually PCBs use LED instead of just D, but D is also technically correct. 3 millimeters, so that's probably these guys here, especially since there's a quantity of 19. S1, S2, no idea what that is. Probably the switches. I believe PCBs usually use B for that. I'm not 100% sure. But either way, still easy enough to figure out. Based on the dimensions 6 by 6 by 5, I know that that is indeed a switch because that's how buttons are labeled. Also, there's only so many components we have here. U1 is going to be U. I don't remember what the U stands for, but U is almost always an integrated circuit, which is going to be this 8-pin bad boy here. And we even have a socket for it, so you don't have to solder the thing straight in, but you can if you want. And yeah, that's right below it. There's no label here in this column because it goes in the same place. BT, that is almost always universally battery. I don't know what this 3.5 nonsense is, but it only came with one battery holder, so that's got to be that. And then this last line here, I'm guessing, is just a listing for the size of this thing. And is there anything on the back here? Yes. So on the back here is a full schematic of the circuit that we're going to build, of the PCB. So I recommend trying to study this and figure it out if you can. Welcome, Teddy. What we're doing here, I'm just soldering together a cheapo electronics kit. Um, Nothing fancy. If you're into Game Boy mods, then this is not the video for you. But if you're new to soldering, then I'd recommend sticking around. Um, but anyway, on the other side of the instructions here, we just have a schematic of the circuit that's laid out on the PCB. I don't really know where to get started explaining this, and since it's not really in focus anyway, I don't think I'm going to get very far if I tried. Uh, but I'd recommend studying this. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'll try and chime in here, but feel free to look up a schematic. Sorry for the dogs. Of course that happens as soon as I open my window. Love it. Yeah, schematic. If you're having troubles, once you get this soldered together and it's not working the way you expect, you can try reading the schematic and try interpreting what this PCB is doing and use a little bit of logic to narrow down what it should be doing and what it's actually doing to try and figure out where the issue is so you can look for it on here. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. This is all through-hole components. We have 4 resistors. In this particular case, they are all exactly the same, so that makes it even easier. 2 buttons, all exactly the same. One brain box, or however you want to put it here. This is from STC, Sierra Tango Charlie. This is a 1-5 Frank 104 whiskey. I forgot what F is. Anyway, doesn't matter. I don't know what this does, but I'm guessing it just blinks the LEDs in the pattern. So let's go ahead and get started here. For the resistors, again, it does not matter for this particular kit because they are all literally the same. But on the resistors, there is a color code that you can read, and just Foxtrot, thank you. You can Google like resistor color codes, and it'll give you all the guide and all the guides for figuring that out. There's also probably one where you can just plug in the specific colors that you read, and it'll tell you the measurement of the resistor. But if you have a multimeter, there's an even easier way. I know this is a 10K resistor or a 1K resistor, so I'm going to cheat by setting my multimeter to the range ahead of time. But in this case, that is 2000. And then if I touch the leads to one side, I can see my multimeter is reading 993. And tolerances being what they are, I know that this is a 1K resistor. Easy peasy. Next, we have the LEDs. Hang on. By the way, when you did the battery mod for the SP, do you think sanding the battery bed inside the SP is wise, or maybe even the battery cover a tiny bit so it fits flush? I don't think you should have to modify your SP. Real quick, I'm going to go on a tangent here, just because someone asked. This is the battery mod that Teddy is asking about. In this SP, you can see it fits perfectly flush. Or maybe not, because it's not in focus, and there's nothing I can do about that, I'm sorry. It's tolerances being what they are. Some batteries are just a little bit bigger than others, and some battery compartments are... Hey, Sumaya, guess what? Bye. Some battery compartments are just a little bit more, a little bit smaller than some of the others. It's a thing in manufacturing, and unfortunately, it's just how it is. Unless you spend significantly more money, tolerances they're a thing you have to live with, and Most of the time they're small enough that it doesn't matter, but in this case we have two things working against each other. The tolerances in the battery compartment being a little bit small and the tolerances on the battery itself being a little bit big. And all I can say to that is if your battery doesn't fit flush, try another shell, try another battery, try both. Eventually you'll find a combo that fits, and if not, talk to whoever you bought the battery from and, ask their advice, because that's unfortunately all I can tell you. Anyway, let's move on to the kit here. The other components, the Brian box here, usually these things are marked with a little dot either in the top left corner or bottom left corner, depending on how you have it oriented, or in this case, a little half moon circle on the left side or the top side, as you can see here. Excuse me, sorry. And you can usually tell from either this little half moon circle on the left here or the little dot on the left which pin is going to be pin number 1. And I don't know how well you can see it, but on the PCB it should be marked as well. You can see this you can see this little half moon circle in the silk screen itself, whereas this side is perfectly smooth, so this would end up going in this orientation, more or less. No, not more or less. This is exactly the orientation it would go in. And for this particular PCB, we can solder that thing directly in, or we can use the socket that it came with. I'll use the socket, but just wanted to show that real quick. Last thing here is going to be the LED itself. Now, I have a tremendously difficult time keeping track of this, which is going to be the positive and which is going to be the negative. If I recall correctly, the short one... Nope, I don't know. I've already lost it. I know there's even a saying that you can try and keep track of which is which, but if you have a multimeter, you put it into diode mode, which in this case is the one with the little play icon and the line on the side. Red probe is positive, black probe is negative. You touch the legs. If it doesn't light up, then you've got it backwards. Try it the other way. Oh, there it goes. I accidentally swapped it around. You can see that way it's lighting up. So the long side, the long leg, which is what I have my red probe on, is going to be the positive. The short leg, which is what I have the black or negative probe on, is going to be the negative. You can double check it that way if you have a multimeter. If not, look it up. There's plenty of guides on the internet. It's easy enough to keep. It's easy enough to figure out, but hard enough to keep track of. Again, or not. Red, positive, long, black, negative, short. Easy peasy. So I guess let's go ahead and get this soldered together. Now I'm feeling real dumb looking at this. I'm pretty sure, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but the red positive, which is the long one, goes on the right side here. You can see the little play button oriented that way. I don't want to solder all these in backwards and give bad advice here, but I'm so bad with LED orientation. I always have to double check it, but we'll do those later. So let's go ahead and get started. My iron almost went into power save mode because that's just what they do. I know it's out of focus. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about that. You can see more of my desk than you usually do, and my camera is much closer to my desk than it usually is. There are about that much space between my camera and the desk. Usually my camera is much higher up. Like I said earlier in the stream, I have a Galaxy S10e. You can see it has multiple camera lenses. I think YouTube is just using the wrong camera lens, and sorry, there's no option to change it. I can flip it over to the other side, but that doesn't do anyone any good. Or I can, oh, hello. That's interesting. It just switched lenses. Is it going to autofocus for me now too? Oh my God, look at that. Teddy, you're a miracle worker. Okay. First 40 minutes out of focus. Nice. Uh, we're learning things today. We're both learning things. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the resistors. I'm going to get started with the resistors. So when you're doing through-hole boards, you should always do the smallest things first. Now, I know that seems a little bit counterproductive when you're doing the smallest things first, because, I don't know, biggest just makes more sense, I think. But if you do the biggest things first, you have to work around them while you're doing the small things. So we will do the resistors. They're all thankfully labeled. We will start with R1 and just do them one at a time. Bend these components, jam them in the holes. Just like that. I'll bend them over just so it stays when I flip it over. And this is why having a soldering iron stand makes sense, so you don't have to keep it in your hand while you're doing this stuff. See if we can't do all four of these at the same time. That was R1 and R3. Here's R2. And here's R4. Some of these kits come with extra components. Resistors are not directional. No, you can solder them in whichever way you want. The only components that are directional are batteries, LEDs, and some capacitors. Well, there's probably more than that, but for something like this, it's just batteries, LEDs, and big old capacitors. But if you shove it through and then bend the legs, then they shouldn't fall out. Flip it over. And as far as soldering goes, let me bring that in. What you want to do is, even though my tip is nice and hot and I can solder to that, you want to put your soldering iron in the joint itself, give that a few seconds to heat up, and then just jam some solder in there. Notice it sticks to the legs, all nice and easy. You can see that that is exactly what we want. It's a little bit much solder, but that's okay. We're gonna be fine, I think. Now my iron has quite a bit of solder on it, a little bit more than I'd like, so I'm going to jam it in my brush here, get it all nice and cleaned up. We'll move on to the next joint. I want to come in from this side, add a little bit of solder, boom. So yeah, as far as why I use this tip, I went over it earlier, but it boils down to personal preference. This is just, I think, the best all-purpose tip. And then we're just gonna do this for every single joint here. And I think that's it. That's it. Boom. Now I'm going to take my flush cutters here. Just trim off the extra. You can leave this stuff if you really want to, but just be careful, because if these bend together, it'll short out and defeat the whole purpose of using a resistor. So it's best to trim them. Boom. Look at that. How beautiful. I'm not going to put that away. I still need that. All right. Easy peasy, right? Love it. Seba, I have noticed you. Is that all you wanted? Uh, yeah, exactly. I like the big K series knife tip because of all that thermal mass. It's just great for soldering. It, trust me, it makes it so much easier when you get all that thermal mass and you can just add the heat directly into the joint. You do have to be careful when soldering stuff like you overheat them, but I think it'll be all right. Next, let's do. I would say the LEDs because they are the next smallest component, but I'm gonna try and do all the LEDs at all. No, I just called you out. No attention at all. Any ideas what might be the issue with the first generation 3DS with a blue light and no screen display? Not a clue, A plus. Sorry, I'm not a 3DS person. Um, I have dabbled, but I don't know. I've never had any issues. Oh, yes. I suppose it's worth mentioning. Another thing that can help you solder is what's called a helping hands. The cheap common one has these two little alligator clips and a magnifying glass. I've literally never used the magnifying glass. I've never found that it actually helps me. But there is another one of these things that I have that I just got recently. Bring my camera up a little. It's one of these things. It has this big weighted solid metal base, and then the arms on it are magnetic. Stick them down, and then they have the alligator clips on the end. And these nice stiff cables. You can flex them wherever, and they stay where they stay where you leave them. Anyway, next up, I'm going to solder the socket for the integrated circuit. Now, technically, it does not matter which way around this goes, but if you take a look here and notice, the top side does have a little divot in it, whereas the bottom doesn't. We will line that divot up with the PCB just to make it a little bit easier on us going forward, just in case. It doesn't, in this case, it does not cover up the silk screen, but if it did, having that on the correct side would make it easier to get things going. So how we'll solder that in, we will solder one corner by, again, jamming the iron in the joint and introducing solder. Remove it. I'm going to do the opposite corner and remove it. And in this case, I'm going to come back and reheat that first joint while I'm applying pressure with the back to make sure that this socket is nice and flush with the board. And then I'm going to come back and do the other corner, same thing. And then, once that's done, I'll come back and do the rest. And this is why I like the K series tip. Because look at that, just did all three of them at the same time. Look at all that surface area. Of course, it does not matter if you do one at a time or all three of them at a time. And if you want to, you can come back, trim these nice and flush, but I'm going to leave them because that's perfectly fine. I'm not worried about these shorting on anything as they are. Unlike the resistor leads, they're not going to get bent over and ruin your day. And then we can take this thing, we'll have to bend. Got messed up with my handling and in the bag and so on and so forth. Jam that in there again. You can line up that half moon circle with the little divot in the board. For the time being, I'm going to leave it out because it's just going to add more height to the board and make it more annoying to solder the other things. But we'll insert it later. Next, I will do the buttons. Those just go in there like that. Do both of them. And then these are doing a pretty good job staying in there themselves, so I'm not going to worry about doing the corners and then coming back and doing the rest. I'll just do all 4. And don't mind if I'm going a little bit fast. Like I said, I've been doing this a very long time, so I'm intimately familiar with soldering. Clean off my tip. Get it nice and clean there. All right. Just get caught up on chat there. Yeah, I actually don't know what this does. There's these LEDs that are laid out in this like starburst pattern, and I think it just blinks LEDs at you. I'm not 100% sure. But last, let me separate out the components I trimmed. The LEDs. How long do these brass cleaning wires last? I have been using this exact same sponge for about a year now. I have flipped it over several times. You can see even on the inside it's all covered in solder. Yeah, I've been using the same one for like a year, if not more. I don't even know at this point. All right. So let me remember here. So again, like I said earlier, we went over this. You can test this again if you want. One question: you always seem to hold the iron with your left hand. Am I left-handed, or is it generally best to have your main hand for feeding the solder? Honestly, you can do whatever the hell you feel comfortable with. I hold it with my left hand because I am left-handed, but I am also one of those weirdo lefties that can solder right-handed too. So I can do either. But just whichever's more comfortable for you. If you find holding it in your right hand is more comfortable, then hold it in your right hand. The whole point of soldering is that you want to do what's comfortable for you. So how I had this flipped around and I was soldering these joints, and then I had it flipped around so I could do the other side, that's just all it is. You just want to do what's comfortable for you. But yes, I hold it in my left hand because I am one of those weirdos who is left-handed. There are literally dozens of us, I swear. Anyway, on the LEDs, the long leg, I believe we discussed this earlier, is going to be the positive. So you can see the arrow points. Oh God, I'm sorry. I need to look this up before I make a really dumb mistake. I always get this backwards, and I'm afraid I'm overthinking it right now. Okay, so the arrow points to the negative. So let's look at this pad right in the middle. You can see there's like a little triangle there and then a line going through that other pad. The one with the line going through it, that is the negative, which is the short lead. So we can feed it in just like that. And then we will do that for all of these. And it's important to pay attention because not all of these are facing the same direction. Just bent the shit out of that one. Oh no, let me bring back chat. All right. So, okay, Teddy, excellent question. You're on fire tonight. When would you say you need to use flux when soldering? So you should be using flux every single time that you are soldering. Not just whenever you feel like it, or if you're soldering something complicated, but you should be using flux every single time you're soldering. Now, but Mako, you might say, I haven't seen you use flux once this whole time. Yes, that is true, my friends. When soldering through-hole components, you don't need to use extra flux. See, there's a trick here. I'm going to set this down, pull my solder off the stand here. I'm just going to set this down right in front of you so you can read the label here. Oh, it actually doesn't say on this solder. Never mind. We'll just roll with it. We'll pretend this is the solder that I'm using. This is the solder that I usually use, but I have much less of it than this KSGER stuff. But as you can see here, it says right on the front, rosin core solder. Rosin is, for all intents and purposes, flux. So if you were to take a little bit of this solder, and you can't tell from this end because it's probably not going to focus, but if we cut this off, maybe you can see, nope, it bent the material over. If you go to Google right now, type in rosin core solder cross section, I'm fairly confident you'll find a cross section of rosin core solder, and you will see that literally inside of the solder is a core of rosin, and the rosin will serve as flux when you're soldering. That's why when you take your soldering iron and introduce solder to it, you see that smoke coming off. That's the rosin core burning off. Now, in most cases, the rosin core within the solder itself is more than good enough for soldering, but that's not every case. Sometimes you need that little bit of extra kick, and in that case you can use my preferred thing here is this liquid flux in this dispenser here, but that again, that comes down to personal preference. There's also, you can get this paste flux in a syringe here dispenser. That stuff is my personal preference when it comes to hot air soldering because it's just a little bit easier to manage. I know a lot of people like to use... Oh no! Where'd it go? I thought I had it. Bear with me. I promise there's a point to this nonsense. Aha! Found it. A lot of people like this stuff. Recommend it. It's a flux pen. It is, it's a combination of the syringe stuff that I have and the liquid stuff that I have, in that it is liquid flux. You can sort of see the end there. As I tip it over, you can see it sloshing around in there. But it has this little felt tip there, and you can just like dab it on a board, and you can see that wet spot. And that's just a way to get the flux where you want. This stuff is pretty good. I personally prefer the liquid stuff in the dispenser just because I think it's a little bit easier to control how much and where. But flux pens are a good way to get started too. As far as which flux I use, I have this stupid big bottle of this MG Chemicals 824 stuff. This is not flux, this is actually isopropyl alcohol. I don't know where my flux is. Shit. It's also MG Chemicals though. Bear with me, I'm gonna go find it, because that's a good question. The bottle looks the exact same, I swear. It's this 836 LFNC, which is liquid flux, no clean. Just just for comparison. I swear, they look identical. But yeah, this is the stuff I use in these just cheap little dispensers. But again, it all comes down to personal preference. It doesn't matter what you use as long as you're comfortable using it. Let me go continue inserting these LEDs here. And now my workbench smells like flux because I spilled a bunch of it everywhere. So I don't know if you guys watch Voultar on YouTube. He streams on YouTube and Twitch. He is a even better resource when it comes to soldering than I am. He even has a Amazon store linked in his description that has some excellent resources. I'm sorry. I need to excuse myself for like 2 minutes. I will be right back, I promise. I'm sorry. Too much club soda. Anyway, I swear, I promise it's the club soda. Okay, sorry. Let me catch up. Yeah, anyway, Voultar, excellent source for soldering. He's basically soldering ASMR at this point. Let's get these all in here. And boom, look at that. We're not done though. We still have to solder all of these. And so this is why I say do the tallest or the shortest components first, because now that I have it set down, you can see the LEDs are what's hitting my table. Maybe. If I put that at a little bit of an angle. Oops, sorry. You can see the LEDs as I move it around or wiggling around in there. So they'll be nice and flush. Let me get that back in the stand. Okay. And I don't have to worry about them being crooked. So let's go ahead and get these soldered now. I'm going to start and just go left to right because, again, I'm left-handed. But if you're right-handed, just literally swap your stuff around. Shove the iron in the joint, introduce solder. That's it. Except for the one that, well, I bent that one. The LED is straight. It's just the legs that are crooked. Don't worry about that one. Let me worry about that one. Oh, I completely forgot to mention this. Um, there's no such thing as no clean flux. I know it literally says no clean on the bottle, but you should still clean it. If you're using flux, do yourself a favor and clean up. You will have obscure, weird problems if you don't. So in theory, that's what it means. Yes, in theory it means it's not corrosive, but all flux is corrosive. It just means less corrosive. All right, so at this point, I think I'm going to trim some of these LEDs because I can't actually get my soldering iron in there. When using flush cutters, you should close your eyes because these things will fly off, usually. Of course, they're not doing it now. In this particular case, I'm putting my finger over the lead. I don't want to poke an eye out. I don't want to lose an eye to a soldering kit. Yeah, they call it no clean, but you genuinely really should clean still. If your solder or if your flux does not say no clean, you definitely have to clean. I would say wear safety goggles, but I'm just being realistic. No one here is going to wear safety goggles. You should. Don't get me wrong. Wireless soldering irons. I haven't... I was going to say I haven't used one that I liked, but that's not true. I have used one that I liked. I used to use a butane-powered soldering iron. And that was my jam, man. That was just my favorite soldering iron. It was so small, and you didn't have to worry about the cord. It was great. Until I accidentally melted a hole in an iPhone with it. You got to be careful, because what they don't tell you when you get a butane-powered soldering iron is that there is a literal exhaust, and you have to be careful where the exhaust goes. Ooh, that one flew off at me. There's also like battery-powered soldering irons. I haven't actually used one before, but I've heard that Hakko makes one. It's like a 936 or something, I believe it is. I've heard it's usable, but unless you hate yourself, there are better irons. So I think unless you need something portable, which in that case you can actually use one of these and then just power it with a power bank. Unless you need something portable, just it's worth the time or worth the money to get a normal soldering iron. I'm just going to go in there real quick and get these last few joints. Eagle-eyed among you might spot a few errors, but that's okay. We'll clean those up in just a second here. All right. Yeah, if you're using IPA for cleaning electronics, the higher the percentage, generally the better. But anything over 70, you'll be fine. But quite frankly, with the current world events, it'll probably be easier to find the higher percentage stuff than the lower percentage stuff, because for sanitization of like germs and shit, the 70% stuff is better than the 90% stuff. Don't use vodka or Everclear or whatever. Don't just, it's, trust me, it'll kind of work, but you'll wish you hadn't in the end. If you want to buy that stuff to drink, I mean, I'm not judging, but just don't use it on your electronics. Anyway, I got that stuff cleaned up. There are a few things that I don't like. Like you can see these joints, they're nice and flat. It's ugly, but electrically it's perfectly fine. If you're like me and you hate it, you can literally just go over it with the soldering iron and just melt the solder on there and it'll fix it. If not, you might need to add a little bit more solder and it'll be good. In fact, it's probably worth the practice. Get yourself some nice clean joints there. But yeah, sorry, clickbait. When this stream is no longer a stream, when it's actually a VOD, the thumbnail will probably be a little bit more accurate, because I can't actually set the thumbnail in advance except by taking a picture of what's actually on my desk at the time. So, sorry, Colton. Anyway, go ahead and take a look at this stuff. Take a look at my joints here and let me know if you spot any of the 3-ish errors. So the first one, I'll give you a clue. There's these little solder balls here. I'm going to clean my iron tip and set it down. These solder balls are easy enough to deal with. They should literally just pop right off. Don't have to worry about them. And in fact, we could just leave them because they're not actually shorting anything. It is bad practice to leave that stuff. But this is something that we would clean up when we're done cleaning this stuff up anyway. Master CPU. Come on, dude. Spoilers. Yeah, that's it. So I didn't solder this leg here, and as you can see here, these two are bridged together. So as far as fixing this joint, it's real easy. We just got to go in there and add solder to it. Easy peasy. As far as fixing this one, though, now a lot of people freak out about this stuff, and trust me, it is much easier to fix than it might seem if you're not familiar with soldering. Now, there's still probably a ton of flux on this board because, like I said, I'm really experienced with soldering. I make this stuff look easy. I'm in and out real quick. You can see all the flux residue. So as soon as I touch my iron to this, it's probably just going to clean that stuff. Yeah, it's going to clean that stuff right up. Let's say that's not the case for you, though. One thing you can do, touch both of them, just add a little bit of solder. If you see that nice shiny joint, pull your iron away. If the solder looks kind of crusty like that, then just keep adding solder until it looks shiny. Just pull it away. If you get a ball that's too big to deal with, take your iron out, clean it up, rinse, repeat. If you're just really not having any luck, that's what the flux is for. Add a little bit of flux, go in there, boil off, add more solder, boom. That's it. Flux is, a lot of beginners are intimidated by flux because everyone and the mommy, there's another bridge. How do we fix it? Just add the iron, get both those joints nice and hot, pull the iron away, that's it. A lot of people are intimidated by flux because everyone and their mom has a different preference for what flux works for them. And that's because it's literally a personal preference. Once you find a flux that you're happy with, then you can do anything that anyone else does with flux. It's fine. But what flux does is at least two different things, probably more than that. One of the main things that flux does is it will clean up the surface that you're soldering to. one of the active ingredients, one of the things that flux does is it is slightly corrosive. So it'll take a small bit of the surface off the component that you're trying to solder to. A lot of the effect of flux is activated by heat. So as long as your board is room temperature, it's not too big of a deal to leave it on there while you're testing. And usually flux is not conductive, but depending on what you're soldering, it could still have an effect because it is still slightly conductive. So good practice to clean up. But anyway, flux will clean up the surface. It'll make it a little bit easier for solder to stick to what you're trying to get it to stick to. Another component of flux, or another function of flux, is to it messes with the surface tension of solder. So let's see if I can't make an example here. I'm gonna make a big old solder ball on my desk here, and we're just gonna give it a minute and try and let the flux cook off. You can see it's nice and shiny right now, and this is a silicone desk mat, so I'm not too concerned, but you shouldn't do this on a regular desk surface. I probably shouldn't be doing this on silicone, but I'm cocky, and that's gonna bite me in the ass someday. But you can see as I'm playing with it more, it's getting less regular. You can see the shape is a little bit different. You can see the surface is getting a little bit cloudy. You can see it's not quite behaving the same way. That's because all the flux is boiling off, and now all we're left with is solder. So I'm gonna pull that away. I'm gonna let that solidify and cool down a little bit, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of flux to that, and I'll show you what it does. I'm gonna let it cool down first though, because if I add flux to it right now, it's just gonna boil off instantly. It's not actually wetting the silicone. That's just all the flux that came out. I can burn that off with my iron. Highly recommend getting one of these silicone desk mats. Super convenient. Voultar said paste flux for wires, no clean stuff for surface mount and through hole. Oh yeah, that's what I forgot to go over. While I'm waiting for that huge chunk of solder to cool down, I have in my drawer, that's not it, that's it. I have this stuff here, this Qualitech paste flux. I purchased this stuff in particular because it's literally what my local electronics store had. This is paste flux. I couldn't dump it out if I wanted to. You got to stick stuff in there. But what's nice about this stuff is if you're tinning wires, you can just stick the wire in there, get flux on it, and then, you know, introduce. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to dip your solder in there, but I don't have wire convenient. Well, you know what? Yes, I do. Shut up, you. Oh God, I lost the battery holder. I don't understand how this happens. I haven't gone anywhere with it. Because I set something on top of it. Yeah, there's also, I don't recommend doing this with flux, but you can get a tip cleaner, which is for the most part basically just flux, but you can dip your tip in there for a second and it'll shine it up all nice. And you can see the solder on there is all nice and shiny, but you should not do that unless you also have one of these to dip your iron in too, to clean up all the rest of that junk. Yeah, that is something you can do with your iron, but it's not something you should do. Not with regular flux, anyway. And yeah, don't breathe in the fumes. Like I said, I literally opened my window to try and deal with that. But let's get back to this solder ball. I was trying to explain what flux does. You can see, now that it is nice and cool, you can see the surface texture of it. It's nice and cloudy. It's not very shiny. Now, to fix that, we can just keep adding more solder to it, and we can use the rosin that's built into the solder as flux and try and revitalize it that way. Or, instead of wasting solder, we'll just add a little bit of flux. get it all melty, and look at that. Now it's nice and shiny. Probably can't see because it's reflecting everything, but you can at least see the shape, how it's all rounded off instead of that weird oblong shape there. That's what flux does. It turns soldering into easy mode. It is highly recommended by anyone who knows what they're doing. Yeah, flux is weird stuff, man. It's a good idea. You should use it whenever possible. That is why they literally build the stuff into solder these days. Anyway, let's get back to the kit, shall we? So I'm gonna that hot thing over there. And the next step is I'm going to put this IC in there. Now, like I've mentioned several times at this point, you can see that half moon circle there. Why am I getting YouTube notifications while I'm streaming? Thanks, YouTube. Okay. That half moon circle up there should line up with the half moon circle in both the socket and on the PCB itself. Just make sure all the pins are relatively straight so that they go into their respective holes. And then we can just jam that home just like that. And then last but not least, we just need to give this thing some power. So luckily, it is conveniently labeled battery plus minus. Most PCBs are. This kit in particular comes with one of these bad boys. And mine has string in it. Alright, I'll just go with it. Alright, so there's these two wires coming off it, red and black. If you don't know by now, the black one is ground or negative. The red one is positive or VCC or whatever. So back to what we started discussing. These wires are pre-tinned, but let's pretend they aren't by doing a pro gamer move here. Cut them off. Let's say you have some nice fresh wires there. Don't use your frickin' teeth. I swear to God. Get yourself a wire stripper. It's worth it. Come in here, strip the wire. Look at how easy that is. No expensive dental bills. Now, we could just work with the stuff like this, but it'll make our lives easier to twist that together so that it doesn't fray. You can melt it off with a soldering iron if you have a fume extractor. But here's what Voultar recommends for good reason. Just dip it in the flux there. Get a big gob of flux on there. And then, in most cases, there's enough solder left over on the iron. Or you can heat it up, add solder, that's it. Nice and tinned. Easy peasy. That's all you need to do. Dip that. Boom. Done. Ooh, my cat's awake. We're going to add this in here. Just like that. And have it tacked down with the solder that was on my iron, and now I'm going to heat it up and add more solder so that it is a nice, solid, fresh joint. You know, solder joint. And we'll do the same for the other one. Boom, that's it. Now I am going to unplug this to turn it off. I'm going to set it where I hopefully won't ruin anything. And I'm going to put the flux away. Yeah, I suppose if you're one of those weirdos, you could just filter the flux through a cigarette. That's perfectly safe. But for the rest of us, I think a fume extractor is the better call. Or the molten plastic there. But that should be it. Now we just need to plug batteries in and hope for the best. I'm going to... Looks like we have one extra LED. I don't know if they included extras just for... just in case, or if they just miscounted, but either way. Always like extra LEDs. Let's try it out. Oh no! Alright. Now, this is going to be one of those do as I say, not as I do things, but I don't have 3 matching batteries. You should never mix and match batteries. I'm going to do it right now, but it's only going to be for a few minutes. I'm not going to leave it. But, ta-da! Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't. The only other batteries that I have are the brand new ones that I'm saving for an upcoming video. And I don't want to use them ahead of time because they might skew my test results. But, look at that. It's always nice when it works right away, right? What do the buttons do? It looks like holding this one, all it does is stop the pattern. Oh. I guess it's just to adjust the speed of the pattern. Now at this point it's basically just flashing. But there you go. Just a cutesy little windmill thing. I don't know. I like it. But that's it. How much was this? This was, well, I'm gonna be fully honest. I didn't pay a dime for this. This just kind of showed up at my doorstep, literally. But if you want one for yourself, it's $3, plus or minus a little bit because shipping. But if you're buying other stuff, and like I said this in the beginning of the stream too, but it's still relevant, and I know we've gotten quite a few people in since then. If you're buying a IPS kit for your Game Boy, I highly recommend buying one of these if you're new to soldering, because these things are like 50 bucks. This is $3. If you mess this up, you still get experience, but you're out $3. If you mess this up, you're out $50 plus the Game Boy that you fucked up. I mean, to me, it's common sense, but not everyone sees it that way. There are other kits out there that you can get, not just this blinking lights and thing. I think, do I still have it at my desk? I have it linked in the description, but there's another kit that I did a little while back with a VU meter, I believe they're called. Basically, it just blinks the LEDs to the tune of music. It's really cool shit. Here it is. This thing. They make these out there. This kit in particular is nice because it comes with the battery holder. So literally all you need is to solder it together and then add batteries and Bob's your auntie. But with something like this, you get it, you still need to plug it into an audio source and a power source. And you need to come up with that on your own. So while I think this kit itself is cooler, it is less functional in its purpose, I guess. This one will teach you how to solder, and you can do it without... Yeah, it's noob friendly. I didn't want to... I was trying to think of the PC way to say that, but it is noob friendly, yeah. But yeah, cool stuff. So I was trying trying to do this as genuine as possible without intentionally screwing things up. But there are a few more things I want to show you as far as errors go and how to fix them. I was kind of hoping I would accidentally screw something up, but unfortunately it didn't come to, or fortunately, I don't know, guess it depends on your point of view. It didn't come to that. Let's talk about solder wick and solder suckers. So this solder sucker is an Engineer SSO2 solder sucker. If you're familiar with solder suckers, you know that this and the Edson solder sucker are basically the Cadillacs of solder suckers. And if you've looked at prices before, you know that these are not cheap. This is about anywhere from $30 to $40 depending on where and when you buy it. Trust me, it's worth it. Alternatively, you can spend a couple bucks on AliExpress and get one of these things. They're not worth it. Trust me. Spend the money, get one of these if you need a solder sucker. It's worth it. Trust me. If you don't need a solder sucker, then don't get either of these. But I'm going to use this one because I love it and I like it. Solder wick, on the other hand, I am using this MG Chemicals stuff. If you haven't noticed a trend, well, here you go. But, throwing stuff everywhere. Look at that. Another MG Chemicals thing. They make good stuff for soldering. They know what they're doing, and they make good stuff. I have other solder wick. It was a little bit cheaper. It was like the same price, and you can see how much more I got. There's a lot of wick there. But I like the, it's worth paying for the good stuff. You don't, it's like tools. You know, you can buy the cheap tool from Harbor Freight and fight with it, or you can spend a little bit more, get the good tool, and just be happy and not worry about it. This is the good tool. It's worth it. Trust me. Anyway, with solder wick, you can see I have used this stuff before because the end is all covered in solder. We will trim that off. Start nice and fresh here. Oh, shoot. I turned off my soldering iron. Where's the cable? We can't use solder wick or solder sucker without a soldering iron. Alright, so these two, how much was this iron? I think it's like 80 bucks. It depends on where you get it because different vendors include different things. Like some vendors include more tips. Some vendors just sell it to you with that cheap conical tip and then you have to buy a new tip with it. I personally, I like other soldering irons because the tips are a little bit cheaper and because the iron itself is a little bit cheaper up front, but these are certainly good soldering irons. I will, I'll update the description with a link after the stream. Otherwise, I know Retro Game Repair Shop sells these too. They sell a lot of things at this point. Yeah, that KSGER, KSGER. I don't know if that's a word that you're supposed to pronounce or if it's an acronym you're supposed to say, whatever. The iron that Red Devd just is talking about, that's a good iron I've heard good things about. I'll update the description with more links after the video, so check back in like an hour or so after the stream. Other videos, check out other links, other soldering irons, stuff like that. But both of these tools, sorry, got distracted, solder sucker and solder wick, do the same thing but in different ways. The purpose of both of these tools is to remove solder from a joint. So let's say that, let's say you just get this ungodly solder bridge and there's just nothing you can do about it. All right. Now, I could probably clear this up by hitting it with my iron, same way I was doing the other bridges. But here is something that a solder wick is good for. You can lay it over that joint, introduce heat, and then you can see the wick is just soaking up the solder. I should have zoomed in. I'm sorry. That was my bad. And pull it away, and you can see it's a little bit blacker on the edges, and that's just because the flux is burnt up. But you can see all the solder is on the wick now instead of on the joint. That is one of the good things a solder wick is good for. Now, if we trim off this end here, and we keep going, there's a lot of solder on here. I told you someone was up. See, we can keep going, and eventually we'll pull enough of the solder away to desolder this LED and pull it out. You can see it's already starting to come out, but both the legs are still solid. But you can see there, a lot of the solder is gone. So, I'm getting there, Teddy. I'm getting there. Be patient, buddy. Promise. All right. So yeah, that's the wick, and some people prefer the wick. I prefer the pump in most cases. You should also unroll it a little bit more, lest you melt the casing like I just did. But that's what your fume extractor is for, so you're not inhaling that shit. I'm going to add some solder back to these joints, make them like regular joints. And now here is what we would use the pump for. Now, in my personal opinion, desoldering a through-hole component is significantly easier with a solder pump. And yeah, you can DIY your own fume extractor. In my case, it's literally just the window open. But here is why I like the Engineer Solder Sucker more than those other cheapo generic ones. You see, this one has a little silicone tip on it. You know, a little silicone tip. I'm sorry, it's not happening. I'm trying to think of a condom joke, but just make up the joke on your own and give me credit. Thanks. What's nice about this silicone tip is you can make a perfect seal around what you're trying to desolder, and the vacuum created when you release the plunger will give you a nice good suction. Whereas with something like this, with this hard plastic tip that literally melts if you jam your soldering iron into it, you know, you're not going to have a good time. Trust me, these things aren't worth it. This is one of the nicer cheap models, but all it is literally this foam grip on it. The inside is the exact same as those cheap aluminum or even plastic ones. And yes, silicone does not burn. You saw me earlier with the silicone dust mat rolling the solder ball around. Okay, it will burn, but you probably won't burn it with a soldering iron. But anyway, let me get that on there. Get it. Look at that. We have all of the solder, well, as much as we can, removed from that hole there. Let's do the other one. Nope, I had bad seal on that one. Let's try it again. There we go. Didn't quite get it because I can't get the LED out. Sometimes it takes a few sucks to get it. But here's a trick for you pro gamers. I'll add more solder to both of those holes again. I'm just going to grab the LED, melt both joints, and pull it out while it's molten. That's even easier than trying to use a desoldering iron. But Mako, how are you going to get it back in? Now there's solder in the holes. Well, my friends, that's when you come in with your solder wick or your solder sucker. Again, I like the, sorry, I was just trying to find which one it was. I like the solder sucker, as it's, for the most part, infinitely reusable. But also because I just genuinely find that it's easier to use. But they both work. In this case, I got the top one with the solder sucker. You see it's nice and see-through. I can drop a new lead in there. This bottom one I'll hit with the wick. And that one is good to go too. We can drop a new LED in there. Just like that. Now this one isn't quite flat because I have the thing in there, so I can't lay the board flat. You can see the LED's just a little bit proud. So what I did, I just soldered one leg. I'm going to come here, hold the board, apply a little bit of pressure, come here with my iron, melt the joint, and then that pressure will push the LED down. You can set it down, come back and do the other one. And notice this whole time I have had the batteries out of this thing because we don't solder live circuits if we can avoid it. Come back, crop the leads, and that's it. We're all done. Look at that. Easy peasy. Now, I know this has been, what are we at? An hour and 42 minutes at this point. If you're an experienced soldering wizard, you can probably do this thing in like 10-15 minutes. And I probably could have done it in like 10-15 minutes if I wasn't talking through every step and getting distracted and, you know, asking for or responding to questions and stuff. But, you know, it's easy. There's no rush. You know, you get it done when you get it done. It's all fine. Now, there is one more thing that I want to discuss, and I can't really get into repair at this moment, but let's say you lift a trace because you're not familiar with soldering. You know, your iron's running too hot, whatever it is, you end up lifting a trace. How you can tell you've lifted a trace is because you can't get solder to stick to it anymore. Yes. Okay. He's off doing his own thing. We're free to discuss soldering a little bit more. Oh, no, we're not. That's okay. He'll be fine. He'll figure it out. Anyway, let's say you lift a trace. It's important to understand that conceptually, a circuit board is literally just a bunch of wires. They're arranged flat and glued to basically a piece of cardboard infused with epoxy. And that's what these little lines on the surface are. That's just one wire. That's all it is. So if you rip up one of these, if I were to, I don't even know how to burn off a trace at this point, but hang on. I have an idea. All right? It involves a knife. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to, which one are we going to do? Let's do this one. I'm going to come in here and slice this right there. Right there. Cut away from myself. Just carve up that trace. Yeah, I know. I know it's fiberglass. I'm just saying from a conceptual standpoint. It's also not literally wires. It's copper, but you know how it is. So I've got my iron here, or my multimeter. When you touch two probes together, because it is in continuity mode, it'll beep. So normally, if I were to touch this probe here, to what this connects to right here, it should beep. But you notice, dun, 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 it's not doing that because I just cut that chunk of the board out. How do you fix it, you might ask? Well, it's pretty easy because this is a relatively simple board. We can follow it with our eyes here. Worst case scenario, we can refer back to the instructions here. There is a full schematic of this board on here. Unfortunately, you have to look to this side to see the component. So that is D19. That is right in the middle there, connected up to the battery connector. So we can see on here, D19 runs to VCC and this resistor. So it's probably this side that we cut. And then on VCC, you can see the battery connector runs up to VCC. So we disconnected somewhere between this battery 2 trace and this LED. So if I were to put batteries back in this thing, I don't think it would work at all. Let's find out. Oh, just kidding. It does work. We just don't have that middle LED, which, quite frankly, I actually like a little bit better. But we can see that because this goes to VCC, but we also have VCC coming in right here on pin 2 of this thing, probably on this side. Yep, you can see the trace goes on this side too. So this just gives us a few options here. I'm going to pull the batteries out before I forget, because I'm going to start soldering. But this gives us a few options because we can look at this board and go, okay, this pin and this pin are supposed to be connected, so I should just add a jumper from that pin to that pin. But I can also see that pin 2 on this chip, which I don't know which it is, we can actually just follow it from this side. No, we can't because it runs under the connector. We can look at it from here. It should be the same layout, so it should be the second pin. We can actually verify that with the multimeter. Pin 2, VCC, beep, boom. So what we can do is I can connect a wire from this pin right here to the LED right there and just bypass this whole trace. But we're going to go the easy way. This is something that you would do from, pin to the LED if your board was just totally messed up and you can't visually trace it. Like if you know that's supposed to be connected, you can connect it that way. But in this case, this board is actually relatively easy to follow, so it's not too big of a deal. I am going to take a little bit of wire, nothing special. I'm going to tin the end of it here. Oh, there's no wire exposed. Just kidding. I'm going to use my wire strippers. Now I'm going to tin the end of it. And ideally, I would cut this to size, but it really does not make a difference here. I'm going to solder that to that pin. And I'm going to come back. This other side is already tinned, or I would tin it right now. Solder it down to the battery connector. And that's actually a little bit of a crusty joint, so I'll come back in here, add more solder. I'm not having a good time, so I'm going to add more flux. Do it that way. And it is still not a great joint, but it is clearly making contact and it's not in danger of shorting on anything, so we're going to go with it for now. I'm not happy with it, but it's good enough. Come back in here. Try that out. And now it's not working at all. It's not working because my wire came out while I was soldering to it. I'll pull one of the batteries out to break the circuit. That's in there nice and good. That hasn't moved. Try it again. Look at that. It's restored. Everything is working now. That's it. That's all it is. Now, I'm easy on myself by cutting the trace nowhere near one of the components. But if the component itself, like if the pad that you're soldering to came off, the only difference in this repair is that I'd be soldering directly to that leg. Directly to that leg instead of the pad on the PCB. And that's it. It's easy. It just takes a lot of practice. But that's one of the great things about these kits. Again, this was $3 plus shipping. If you're ordering other components, I highly recommend just throwing one of these in your cart. If you don't want to do that, if you literally just want one of these things, just go to AliExpress, go to eBay, type in soldering kit, and scroll through the thousands of options that come up. Find something that looks good to you, and Bob's your auntie. That's it. It's easy. So give me just a sec. Let me catch up on chat here. Can we use a 1.1 amp 6 volt fuse for the Game Boy Color, or 0.75 amp 6 volt fuse more better, or 0.5 amp 6 volt? So L. Flinjotan, when it comes down to fuses, the lower spec the fuse that is still higher than the power capacity that you're going to be used is better. So what I mean by that is the Game Boy Color is only going to draw so much current. So what you want is a fuse that is slightly above that amount of current and no higher. That is the optimal fuse. In this particular case, I think any of those fuses is going to work for you, but I would use either the 0.75 amp or the 1.1 amp fuse, whichever one you have on hand. 0.5 amp fuse should work in theory. My only concern with that one is if your batteries are a little bit lower and you have an IPS kit and you're using a flash cart, it could peak a little bit higher than 500 milliamps, and that might pop the fuse. I believe the stock fuse is 1.25 amps, but they're a little bit over-spec'd. Actually, it depends. The Game Boy Color uses two different fuses, so I don't know which one you're talking about, and it doesn't matter because I don't know which is which offhand. Are we making Skynet? No, we're not making Skynet. Not today. That's next weekend. But yeah, cheapo soldering kit. Highly recommended if you're new to soldering. And can I put it in a Game Boy now? Are you happy, Master Luke? Yeah, it's not great, but it's okay. Let's so I want to talk about one more thing because I'm here. Why not? Instead of desoldering this, I'm just gonna cut these off. This is not one of them, but some soldering iron kits come with a 2 battery holder. And one of the cool things that you can do with that 2 battery holder is when you're done playing with your kit, you can cut these ends off and solder on... Where is it? Where is it? It's over here. Let me get it. There it is. And you can solder on alligator clips and then use it to power Game Boys off your bench by just throwing 2 batteries in there. Unfortunately, this one is a 3 battery holder, so that won't work for that. But another thing we can do, I'm going to strip these down. twist them together. And get rid of my soldering iron because we're not doing any more soldering. Nice and clean. But I can take my power supply and if you recall, each AA battery is 1.5 volts. So 3 of them together should be 4.5 volts. And we can just power it this way. Maybe. Apparently it doesn't like that. 3.7 volts is a little bit low. How about 4.8 volts? That's a little high, but yeah, it works off that. That seems to work off 5 volts too. So you can power this off of USB if you're crafty enough. I recommend battery power because if you get it backwards and you plug it into your computer and something explodes, that's not on me, but it does work 5 volts. So let's modify. Oh, shoot. Yeah, 3 volts is too low, unfortunately. I was hoping this would work off of 3 volts, because then they could just include a 2 AA holder, but unfortunately it looks like this thing is designed for higher voltages. Yeah, any lower than 4 volts and it, or, yeah, any lower than 4 volts and it doesn't like it. We can go down to 3.9, but if we go lower than 3.9, it stops working until we bring it back for 4. Shame, but there you go. It was a personal curiosity. Yeah, that is exactly why I should have a cheap USB charger instead of just plugging it into your $1,500 gaming computer. Yeah, it does need 3 AA's. I was really hoping it could work with 2, but it looks like 3 is necessary for this particular component, for this particular thing. So why did Nintendo use 6 AA batteries instead of a 9 volt in the printer? Because batteries are complicated, man. But it boils down to the larger the battery, the more capacity it has, and the more potential current it can output. So this battery, while it's only 1.5 volts, it should be able to put out quite a few amps of current. One of these batteries, a coin cell, it's 3 volts, higher volts, but this thing will shit out on you if you try and draw more than 300 milliamps or thereabout. I don't actually know the limit. I haven't tried pushing one of these things. I have tried booting a Game Boy off one for fun. Didn't work, so there's that for you. But anyway, the larger the battery, the more current it can put out. Game Boy printers are thermal printers. What that means is they use heat to imprint an image onto the paper itself instead of using ink. I don't know if you're aware, but generating heat takes quite a bit of power. So you need the more oomph with the larger battery. 9 volts are cool, but that's all they have going for them. 6 AA's have significantly more power in them than a 9 volt does, even though they're at the same voltage. What iron do I use? For this video, I've been using the TS80P iron. Go on. with the K series knife edge tip. That is my current man crush on soldering iron tips. But the normal iron that I use is a Heiko clone. It doesn't say anything on the iron handle itself, but it is an X-Tronic 3020 X2S, or XTS, excuse me. Look up X-Tronic model 3020, and that's what I have. I recommend if you're in the US, because that's where they ship from. If you're not, it is literally just a rebranded, shoot, I'm forgetting the name. It's a rebrand of a Chinese generic iron, so you can get literally the same iron under a different name. But get what works for you. What is the best temperature? I use 300 degrees Celsius. That's the temperature I'm comfortable with. You can use a hotter temperature if you're soldering bigger things or if you're moving really quickly, or you can use a lower temperature if you're moving really slowly and working with smaller things. But I find 300 is the best bang for buck, I guess. It's the best all-around value. I'll adjust it depending on what I'm doing, though. That's just what I start at. Yeah. I thought I had the audio desync figured out, and I had a workaround for it, but that made my video really choppy, and apparently didn't fix the audio desync at all. The solution now is literally just to use the YouTube app on my phone, and I hate it because I can't actually set up the stream ahead of time, but it is what it is. You cannot solder a tin. Teddy asks, on the top of coin cells, what's a way of soldering or spot welding some tin strips on top of it, like DIY? Teddy is talking about, for those that aren't aware, the tabbed coin cell batteries. You can buy these untabbed coin cells basically at any pharmacy or some electronic stores. Most of them do not carry the tabbed ones in store, but they are not more expensive. The only problem is because you're buying them online, you also have to pay shipping on top of that. The batteries themselves are basically the same cost, but that doesn't answer Teddy's question. Teddy's question is, how do you get tabs on? Teddy, unless you have a spot welder, you do not get reconnecting. Oh, sorry, it cut out. Teddy, you cannot solder tabs to a battery. That's how it works. If you have a spot welder, you can attach your own tabs that way. If you do not have a spot welder, you can build one. But they're not exactly cheap. And it's not exactly an easy DIY. If you just need a couple tabbed batteries, just do yourself a favor, go on DigiKey or Mauser and buy yourself some tabbed batteries. Yeah, LTT did a video on it. It is definitely possible to DIY, but you cannot solder. If you solder, what you're doing when you're soldering is you're transferring heat into the component. When you touch the soldering iron to the component, you're transferring heat into it. You do not want to do that because batteries are very sensitive to heat. It will lose capacity depending on how hot you get it. And if you get it too hot, it will literally, I'm not making this up, it will literally explode. Do not solder tabs to batteries. The reason they spot weld is because, yes, it does get hot, but it's so focused and for such a short amount of time that it does not negatively affect the battery chemistry. So, unfortunately, if you bought untabbed batteries for your Game Boy PCB, if you bought untabbed batteries for your Game Boy PCB, you're shit out of luck. You need tab batteries. You can't use that untabbed one. It just doesn't work. And yes, oh, I know, I've seen the guides. You can just pry the tabs off and tape a new battery. Don't do that. You pry the tabs off, you're gonna screw yourself over. Trust me, just buy the tab battery. It is very easy to solder in a new battery. If you're prying the tabs off, you are risking permanent damage to the PCB itself. You are also, chances are pretty good you're doing it on a Game Boy Color game, not a Game Boy Advance game. You know, little indie series called Pokemon. If you're prying the tabs off of one of these bad boys and shoving a battery in that way, it's not going to make good contact, and your save is on borrowed time. You could lose your save literally at any time if you accidentally bump the cartridge wrong, and it's just not worth it. Buy the tab batteries, please. I'm begging you. Also, if you talk about taping batteries on my channel, I will block you. Just throwing that out there now. Sorry, that's tangent. That's one of my peeves. You cannot solder to batteries. Period. End of story. You can solder to tabs that are spot welded onto batteries. And yeah, on some games you can just buy battery holders. That's usually not a thing on OEM Nintendo games, but if you're soldering together like an aftermarket flash cart, those are usually built for battery holders, and you can use untabbed batteries that way. That's perfectly fine, but only if your cart is built for that. If you're doing like Super Nintendo games, I think Voultar has a good video on that, and you can solder in a battery holder that way. Or not just Super Nintendo, but N64 and NES as well. All three of them. I don't know if Genesis or Mega Drive games use batteries. I can't get this back in the holder. Okay, it's gonna live on my desk until the end of the video. Okay, what else? What else are we talking about? Yeah, Teddy, you fixed your Game Boy Advance cartridge with a dead battery by putting two wires on top and bottom and used heat shrink. No, you didn't fix it. You found a workaround and you're lucky that it worked. That is not a fix. That is not a good solution. Where can you buy a pre-built blank flash cart? Well, I literally just got these in. These are from retrostage.net. These seem pretty cool. I'm still working on testing them. I will end up... Actually, I don't know if I'll do a video on these. But so far, alright. If you want to flash one of these, though, unfortunately, you need their flasher, which is like 52 bucks. I am working with Alex from Inside Gadgets to get these carts supported on the GBX cart reader, but so far it's not working too well. The Game Boy Advance version of this cart, which I also have on my desk right here, these work out of the box with the GBX cart, so those are nice. On the topic of GBX, Inside Gadgets also does sell a whole slew of flash carts. If you want a flash cart for something, they probably have it, and if not, ask and they'll probably make it. Yes, I do have that Skyrim intro cart, but it's just a generic bootleg with a video flash to it. But yeah, Inside Gadgets, check them out. They make excellent stuff. I'm gonna plug them because Alex is super good people, and he's always helped me out with stuff, even when he had no obligation to do so. And he's such a nice guy, and the stuff he makes is just genuinely good. I love it. But he sells flash carts as well. And bonus, if you don't want to buy the cart flasher, but you're still buying a flash cart, you can just email him the ROM and he'll flash it to the cart that you're buying. Yeah, Red Dev'd, sorry, I've never dived into GB printers, and I don't have any resources on them. They've never interested me because the paper that they use, unfortunately, is in a size that's not so common anymore, and the original paper itself is just no good. So it's just not something I've been interested in. I did end up actually picking up a GB printer XL kit that I've been meaning to do video on, but I haven't actually picked up the printer portion of that kit yet, and I haven't until I pick up that printer portion of the kit. There's no real point in assembling the other part of the kit since I can't really test it or play with it. So it'll come eventually, but until then, sorry, I got no info on that. Yeah, see, that's the thing. All the links are about making printer paper because it uses that thin paper that you can't really get anymore. There's still new old stock of the original paper, which is complete garbage. It's all expired by now. Yes, the thermal paper does expire, by the way. It's terrible. It's unfortunate. Um, but there was another printer that used the same thickness paper, and you just had to unwind some of the spool because the spool was just too wide and it didn't fit. But as long as you unwind it a little bit, you can stick it in there, and then you can just use that extra paper when you're done with the spool. You just feed that in manually and it'll work. But I think that paper has since been discontinued, and the only stuff that you can find now is new old stock. And it does still work. It's just not as cheap as it used to be because, discontinued. The only new thing I know about regarding the Game Boy Micro, the last video I did with the overclock mod, I haven't seen anyone else do an overclock mod on a Game Boy Micro, except that one video I linked in the description, or that one web page I linked in the description, excuse me. Beyond that, I haven't seen anyone else do it. There was talk a long time ago from Boxy Pixel about making a new shell for the Game Boy Micro. Last I heard, he was still trying to track down a Game Boy Micro that was broken so he could try making a new frame for it. I don't know if he ever did anything about that. I don't think he has. I've heard nothing, at least, beyond that. Granted, he could just buy a new, or at least working Game Boy Micro and work off of that, but the whole purpose was to fix the broken one, so I think he was trying to track down a broken one. Anyway, to answer your question, no, I have not heard anything about the Game Boy Micro developments. Hey, if it's not too much, what's a quick recap on the cheap Alley IPS V2s versus funny plane kits for the SP? I have my thoughts on that. I've compiled an entire wiki, and one of the pages in that wiki is my thoughts on all the IPS kits and backlight kits for Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color and every other Game Boy. I recommend checking it out. It's probably in the description. If not, well, nah, it's in the description. Wait, shit, it's not in the description. Ugh, no, how dare I? Well, hang on. I can fix that. Modifications, backlight mods. It's not in description, but it's in chat. It's in the description of most of my recent videos, though, that I've done backlight kits. Most of the backlight kits that I've done videos for. It's in the description of those. But that's a whole wiki. That's just a specific page in the wiki. I'd recommend checking it out. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I spent a lot of time on that. Any new IPS kits coming out? Yes. I don't know if I can share any more details on that, though. Well, here's something I can talk about, because it's technically already out. They just are still in transit to everyone that isn't in China. There is a 2.6-inch kit for the Game Boy Color. For those that aren't aware, the stock screen on a Game Boy Color is 2.4 inches. So the 2.6-inch kit is larger than stock. It is the exact same screen that has been going into Game Boy Pockets. So it is Game Boy Pocket sized in Game Boy Color. It will require quite a bit of shell cutting, and it will require a custom lens. And beyond that, I don't know much else about it because I don't have my hands on one yet. Soon though. Oh, there's these new I'm throwing stuff everywhere. There's these new DMG shells from Funny Playing that I'm gonna do a video on shortly. Cool stuff. But these are, just for those that aren't aware, these are IPS ready, at least for the Funny Playing kit. But seems pretty good so far, but I haven't actually installed anything in it yet. Too many projects, not enough time. You know how it is. Any resources for making a colorization hack for a DMG game? Pixel, I do not, but I know where you can get started. I would recommend checking out the GB Dev Discord. If you go to the Game Boy Discord, check out the resources tab. There will be a link to that Discord, to the GB Dev Discord, and I believe they have their own resources there that you can read up on, or you can just ask someone there. Am I into NDS and newer stuff? Not really. I mean, I dabble, but my main passion is Game Boys, because it's fun. I've done quite a few videos on PS Vitas, a few on PSPs, I've done a few videos on 3DS consoles, but it's all just, I don't know. I like the retro stuff because there's more to it than basically just enabling piracy at this point. The other consoles like Nintendo DS, 3DS, PSP, PS Vita, for the most part, the mods for those consoles are just enabling homebrew or enabling piracy, and I don't know, that's not really what I'm into. I like shit like this, you know, making my own housings. Adding new charge ports, adding blinking lights where there weren't any, stuff like that. That's just more fun on the old consoles. Oh, chat's moving too fast. Oh no. Let me catch up, hang on. Oh, El Flinjotan. I'm glad you bought the GBX cart. I'm not glad that you had to deal with the Joey being out of stock, but that is unfortunately just how Ben runs his shop. If you can catch it when it's in stock, you'll get something alright, but the GBX cart is just the better cart reader when it comes to cart readers. If you check out the wiki page that I linked up above, I have a page on cart readers as well, but the GBX is fucking mint, alright? There's also, I'm not sure if I can reveal the specifics, but I'll give you a teaser. There are going to be new vendors outside of Australia carrying some Inside Gadgets products, not all of them. I know one vendor in particular in the US is going to be carrying them. And I think Retro Modding has just started carrying some of their stuff as well. I don't know the specifics of what they're carrying though. I didn't see GBX listed on Retro Modding, but I know this particular vendor in the US is going to have some GBX carts. So if you're in the US and you want to get something shipped and don't want to have to wait for Australia shipping, then, you know, wait for Australia shipping so you can order it from a reseller. But you know how it is. You know what I'm getting at. But Alex is good people. Alex runs Inside Gadgets, and he genuinely makes good stuff. I love it. Yeah, back on that conversation on DS stuff, I'm not really into it, but there are some mods that I was going to start dabbling in. I can't really reveal the details too much at this point because I don't want to talk about it before it's even materialized. I don't want to I don't want to lose the motivation for that, and I don't want to give any other people ideas and have them beat me to it. I'll get to it eventually, but all will be revealed in its good time. Teddy, is all this related to what I do full time or not? It is completely unrelated to what I do full time, which is why I enjoy it so much. Because if it was what I did full time, this would be just a chore to me. I am basically a systems admin for a company in my local area, and it's great. But this is completely different. Yeah, Lincoln Park, those Retro 6 pre-trimmed shells, they're alright, but the Funny Playing ones are significantly better in my experience. I have both. I've used both. I like the Funny Playing ones better. Can you get good replacement screws for the Game Boy Colors and pockets? Kinda. If you don't mind switching to a different tip style, yes, but I don't have a good link. You'll have to find them on your own. They are a standard size, just with a different head. Ty says, I got here late. Can you show your housing again? How are they made? I'm assuming you're talking about this, or the one in the thumbnail, which is exactly this, but anodized black instead. They're CNC machined. My buddy has his own machine shop, and he's been helping me out with prototyping, and once we're done prototyping, he's going to start selling some of them. And it's going to be good, but soon. I have what I believe is going to be the release candidate in the mail on my way, or on its way to me right now. And if all goes well, then we'll start making them. But I believe that's the last revision on its way. Yeah, dude, I really wish they made decent quality NDS shells. What we have now is absolute garbage. And wink wink nudge nudge. I may or may not do something about that. Probably not, but I'll look into it. Yeah, the latest prototypes, the red one is the very first one that he made. Ow. My cat's in my lap now. The red one is the very first one that was made, and then he made the black one, which improved on a few things, but he didn't actually finish the shell because I ended up making a revision before then, so it looks done from the front, but it's not actually finished on the inside aside from the screen cutout, so I can't actually put it together if I wanted to. But it's still cool. Then he made a purple one, which is of the new revision that I was talking about. But before he even finished that, he pointed out a few issues to me that I hadn't noticed in my 3D printed prototypes. And so I fixed those, and now we're on a blue one, and that's the one that's in the mail to me. I think the purple one's on its way too, but the blue one is the release candidate. So yeah, there is a similar one on Thingiverse, but it's different. It's not I've made one of those. It's all right, but it's not quite the same thing. Mine is styled after OEM, so you can use the excuse me, I got the hiccups. Let me actually sit up in my chair instead of leaning back. So I have his machine buttons in here. This is one of the problems that I was having. You can see the button doesn't actually click, it's just kind of jammed down. But that is fixed in the latest revision. But you can see it works with OEM buttons. You don't have to 3D print or order custom buttons. It's good stuff. That's one of the things that I was super stoked about with my kit here, because I haven't seen anyone else do this with the SP shells. I've seen a few other SP shell iterations, but they all use custom buttons. What are the rough dimensions thickness-wise? Ugh. I'll show you exactly how thick it is. That's how thick it is. It's as thick as the bottom half of a stock. It's as thick as the bottom half of a stock SP. At least on the bottom. It gets a little thicker towards the top where the screen is, but it's the same thickness at the bottom and then a millimeter thicker at the top. Mine has fully functional L&R buttons. And they're much better than the L&R buttons on the 3D printed shells, trust me. One of the cool things, obviously this one isn't assembled, but on the assembled ones, you can set them down flat on a table and you don't have to worry about actuating your L&R buttons, and it'll actually sit flat because the L&R buttons are, you'll see. I'm getting ready to reveal the magic on that one. And trust me, some of you are going to be kind of mad with how dead simple it is. It's not too early for a stream. You're just in one of those weirdo time zones. Basic. So the plan was to release STL files. And I know I said that I will do that, and I will do it, but based on how some other people in the community have acted, I'm going to delay that until after they've had a chance to sell from my buddy's store for a little while. I will release them eventually. I will release STL files, step files, and F3D because I'm making it in Fusion 360. So F3D is the native file, but I'll export it in step and then I'll export STL. But I know I said I'll release them, and I promise I will eventually, but I'm putting a slight delay on that because I want my buddy who's been super, super helpful. This guy. I want him to be able to get what I believe is his fair share out of it. Especially since someone came in riding my hype train, and definitely not butthurt about that. No, not at all. I will say, I teased this at the beginning of the stream too, but size-wise, look at how different that is, right? Mine is so much smaller than an SP. The other common shell is the size of a DMG. Mine's smaller. Mine's pocketable. Anyway. Am I going to beat Boxy Pixel to market? Probably not. But at the same time, I'm also not rushing mine. It'll be done when it's done. And no sooner. He's probably going to beat me to market, and he's probably going to have significantly more of them. But beyond that, that's all I got. Mine'll probably be cheaper though, and higher quality. I've never liked the finish on his shells. I don't mean this to be a shit-talking moment, but on his Game Boy Advance shells in particular, the finish around the cutouts is it's not great. I've never been happy with that. if you can find the pictures, you know what? Hang on, I think mine's sitting on the couch right over here. Yeah, I think that's it. That's a nice heavy case. So I've never been happy with this kind of stuff. Look at the clearance around that cutout, man. That's like hot dog down a hallway. Look at the shoulder buttons, right? On a stock Game Boy Advance, the shoulder buttons are contoured. There's these curves. On here, it's just this straight 90-degree angle. I hate it. Look at this chattering around the shell. This is... Come on, look. Panel gaps. This is a oxypixel shell. I'm not making this shit up. Now, this is, in all fairness, this is the original release. So when he first released the Game Boy Advance shells is when I bought this. I know he's made some revisions, including USB-C support and IPS kit support. This one only has an AGS 101. But I've never been happy with his finishes. And that is one of the things that I was absolutely anal with on mine. I tried to make sure that all of the features line up nicely. Yeah, it's not going to focus. Yeah. So, but, you know, if you like his styling better, if you can't wait for mine, buy his. Whatever, I'm sure it'll be fine. I just personally, I don't like it. I'm not saying it's bad, I don't... Actually, I was just saying it's bad. But genuinely, for the price of what custom machined CNC aluminum shells cost, they are still dirt cheap. So you are still getting a hella good deal. But I'm just saying I like the retro CNC ones a little bit better. Alright, let me catch up on chat. I'm sorry, I ranted for a little bit longer than I meant to. Ego my Lego. I can't tell you the last time I've actually beaten a game on Game Boy Advance. I spend more time modding. That's the hobby for me. I don't actually play them, I just mod them. And collect them. There, the secret's out. That's why my copper buttons are still so shiny. They haven't oxidized yet. Yeah, I genuinely don't like how this feels. The ergonomics on this shell are so completely different compared to the stock Game Boy Advance. And the ergonomics on the stock Game Boy Advance were never its strong suit for me. Like, I've never really cared for it one way or the other, but this is a noticeable downgrade, and I don't like it. It's not to say it's bad. My personal preference when it comes to this shape, though, I don't dig it. Yo, those retro CNC anodized buttons, they're hot as fuck, boy. Check this shit out. Look at that. You can't tell me that doesn't look good. I love it. Made in America. You know, if that's a thing that appeals to you. Alright, I'm not gonna lie, I've always been partial to the SP because I'm one of those weirdos who actually likes being able to play one-handed. And can't do that with the GBA. Most games, like I said, I don't actually play that much anymore, but a lot of the games I play are turn-based, so it doesn't matter that I'm playing with one or two hands, and just playing with one hand is more convenient. So I've always liked the SP, but that's just me. You know why one side of the screen, GPSP screen border is wider? So here's a fun thing, and I don't think I've ever showed this off in video, but go ahead and take a look at your Game Boy Advance SP. I'm not making this shit up. The screen border on the left side, 5.5 millimeters. Screen border on the right, Jesus, I know my left and right, I swear. Screen border on the actual left side is 7.25 millimeters. 5.5, 7.25. It's like that from the factory on every single Game Boy Advance SP. I have fixed it on mine, I promise. I don't know why it's like that from the factory. I am assuming it's because of the screens that they used. It was just easier and cheaper to offset the shell. The alternative was just making it slightly wider. I don't know why it's offset, but it is. And they're all like that. And that's knowledge that you can't forget. Alright, yeah, I know. If I set it down, I can play one-handed, but I still have fingers across the screen. Most of the time when I'm actually playing, I'm doing something else at the same time. So I'm eating, for example. It's actually, I've taken up reading now instead of playing games. So while I'm eating, I'm just reading, and that actually works out better for me. But I can't play and eat without interrupting one or the other, so do it one hand. Pixel Prime, where can I get that aluminum SP shell? Retro-cnc.com. Soon, but not yet. They're not out yet. Still working on it. I'm trying to make sure that everything, I don't want to say perfect, because it's never going to be perfect. That's not how these things work. But I'm trying to make sure it's good enough and up to my standards before we start just sending them. They're perfectly usable now, but there is still room for improvement, so we're trying to work on that improvement before just sending them. Look at this, there's red too, not just purple. Price estimate, I can't give you an estimate. You got to talk to Retro CNC on that one. I've been given an estimate, but that was just a ballpark, and it's not my place to share it because that was, I don't know. He's still got to work out how much it costs to actually make them, got to factor in overhead, that sort of stuff. All I can say is when, by the time they're ready to come out, we'll have pricing figured out. I have a hunch they'll be cheaper than Boxy Pixels, just based on the sheer size of his shell and how much material that it uses, and the historical pricing of his shells. But they might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less. They'll be ballpark though, in the same ballpark. Are those Advance or Color Pixel Prime? What are you talking about? The buttons? Pretty sure these are Game Boy Advance buttons. The Game Boy Color ones have a, I don't even know, man. The Game Boy Color ones have a slot cut in the D-pad. But yeah. Oh, there's Hazi sharing a link. Hazi knows what's up. Yeah, sorry if you're just joining in now. I'm basically just bullshitting. You'll have to rewind to see the actual content of the stream. Are you gonna do some shells that are custom made for like funny playing IPS screens? Lincoln Park. Can you please elaborate? I don't know what you mean by that. If you're talking about this thing, again, this is built for the aftermarket, not the aftermarket, the generic unbranded IPS kit, but it will technically work with funny playing kits too. There's just, you'll have to get creative if you want brightness control, on account of there being no brightness button. When they come out, I'll mention something to Voultar and see if there's anything he can do about adding in extra pads for button controlled brightness. That Game Boy is about the same weight as... This Game Boy is lighter than this one, but this one has no back. So they're about the same weight when all is said and done. I don't have one of the final ones. I know the final ones are lighter than this though. Yeah, AM Victory. I started off the stream. I had that on my desk and I was just showing off because when I start my streams, I like to give it a few minutes to let people trickle in because I don't actually schedule these. I just decide, hey, I'm going to stream and hit the go live button. And now that we're actually done with the stream, I'm just chilling with chat and answering questions and junk like that. And one of the common topics happens to be this thing, so that's what keeps coming up. Favorite Pokemon Gen 2 game? That's not even a fair question. Well, actually, wait, you have to elaborate. Do you mean stock or ROM hacks? Actually, it doesn't matter. I can answer either. Crystal and then Crystal Clear. Nah, see, Meowstic, I have to disagree with you there. Perfection is impossible. There's always room for improvement. It will never be perfect. I'm aiming for the damn good level, though. And where we're at right now, as far as this prototype, is reasonable. But that's my fault, not our CNC. Yeah, if Retro 6 is perfection, I do not want to strive for that. I don't even have a name for this Jesus thing yet. I'm open to suggestions. Lucas Lovelace, what 3D printer do you have? If you're talking to me, which it's my stream, I assume you are, I currently have an Ender 3 Pro. Great printer for the price. Yeah, see, Colton, that's basically what I've been referring to it as. But I consider that more of a code name than a product name. Dude, reply to as many people as you want. I know that wasn't in the chat, but you know who I'm talking to. You know who you are. You're not a dick. You're a good person. People like you. Hey, you just added yourself, buddy. Yeah, that's right. I can pay attention to two different chats at the same time. But only because I saw the notification. I also genuinely don't know how to end this stream because I'm streaming from my phone. There's probably an end stream button somewhere on it. And we're getting to that time. That time where I'm out of beer. Suppose I can start cleaning up though. I don't know. I'll give it a couple more minutes before I end the stream if you guys want to get in a little bit more chat. See, there are two different ways I can go as far as the name is concerned. I can go full Nintendo and, you know, just keep tacking on buzzwords like Game Boy Advance, new Game Boy Advance SP Flat Edition Plus, or some bullshit like that. Or I can give it an actual meaningful name that makes sense. And yeah, I agree with you on that, Kevin. The any similarity to the Analog Pocket is genuinely pure coincidence. This is not at all inspired by the Analog Pocket, but I will say it does take a few design cues from the same console that the Analog Pocket is inspired from. So take that as you will. Where's my tape? Do I recommend the iFixit tools? You tell me. Same kit I've been using for a year. I've had this thing a little bit less than a year. I actually got this for Christmas last year. I don't know how to say this without overselling it, and I genuinely hate recommending the iFixit kits because I feel like a shill every time I do, just because of how genuinely frequently they are shilled on YouTube. They pay for so much advertisement, but they are genuinely good kits. And they're not paying me to say that. Don't get me wrong, it would be cool if they did. But I like it. They're good kits. If you're doing a lot of Game Boy stuff, it's recommended. Yeah, seriously, the more buzzwords we can add to the name, the better it'll be. That's how that works, right? See, that's the thing. I'm not sure if we lean towards the ambiguous name where if you Google it, you don't actually get the results, because putting the word new in a console doesn't actually help you narrow down search results. I'm not a shill. Why did they name a kid after me? Fuck, you got me there, bud. Any thoughts on the Game Gear Micro? It's super cool for what it is, and what it is a collectible and nothing more. If you want it for seriously playing games, look elsewhere. It's too small to... It's too small. That's just all it is. It's cool, don't get me wrong, look at the box size in the thing. That's how big a Game Boy Micro is. Right? A Game Boy Micro is the size of the freaking box. It's just too small. Game & Watch. I also grabbed that because I knew that was coming up. This thing's cool, but again, they're collectibles. Oh my god, I just opened a limited edition collectible. And for all the people that are like super stoked for hacks on this thing, you should be aware that it only has 1 MB. 1 MB of internal storage. So if it ever runs Game Boy ROMs, at most you can run Pokemon Red or Blue. You are never going to run Pokemon Crystal, Gold, or Silver on it. Alright, look at... They're small consoles. Yeah, look at how small that screen is. It's ridiculous. It works. It is a functional prototype. Or not prototype, it's a functional collectible. But it is clearly nothing more than that. Come on. Do something. There it goes. Like, yeah, it works. You can play games on it. It's just small. It's very small. Very small. Also, it's kind of laggy. I don't know if it was like that on the original Game Gear. If it was, then I would have hoped they fixed that. And if it wasn't, well then there's your downside. But anyway, yeah. It's cool. If you have the chance to pick one up for MSRP or less, go for it. But don't bother otherwise. I'm glad I got one. It's really cool. But if you want to actually use it and you don't have one, you're in for disappointment. But yeah, the Game & Watch is literally the size of the box. Jesus, is it that late? Wow. I mean, this one actually runs the game perfectly fine though. So that's nice. Oop. Ability notwithstanding, but yeah. Anyway, sorry, I lost track of chat again. I've heard some rumors that iFixit toolkits feel cheap and break easily. I have never broken I have never broken or had any troubles with my kit. I've had it a year, and the most trouble it's given me is either reading the labels on the foam or the fact that I have literally lost bits and had to buy more to replace them. But both of those are user error for the most part. Do manage to break something, they do have a lifetime warranty, like HDR said. They'll just mail you a new bit or a new driver or whatever you break. Any thoughts on the G-Boy? So, regarding the G-Boy, all right, I really want to build one. That is so cool. All right, that just conceptually, that's just so cool to me. I really want to build one. My single problem with the kit is that it comes with a 3D printed shell. If they were to sell a kit that is plastic injection molded or wink wink nudge nudge CNC machined, I'd be all over that shit. But I don't want to pay $400 for some PCBs and a 3D printed shell. That's all it is. I was planning on making my own DIY version with a switch light housing. Probably shouldn't have said that, but at this point, I don't care if someone makes it, then they can do the legwork for me. It'll just make my job, it'll just make my work easier. But I don't know. I feel like that's where it's at right now, because you can get those shells really cheap, and they're plastic injection molded and relatively high quality, and you can get a nice big screen for them too. That's not to say you don't get a lot of stuff with your 400. It's just the 3D printed shell is just not something that I can get into. It's not something I can get behind. I know they include all of those custom PCBs too, and that is super cool. But that's the shell is the part that you interface with, and I just look. I have experience with 3D printed shells, and I just can't. All right. I know theirs are going to be better than the junk that I was making, but it ain't for me. Until they change that, or until I do something else, I can't get behind it. But yeah, the G-Boy kit, it seems cool. I'm eager to see what comes next. We'll put it that way. All right, guys, I think it's about that time. I've been streaming for 3 hours. I'm out of beer, and I finished what I was working on like an hour ago, maybe even more. So at this point, I'm just shooting the shit. If anyone has any questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. Awakening Seasons or Ages. I haven't played any of them. I've never really been that into Legend of Zelda games. Shoot me. I don't care. Now, they're on my list. I actually own 2 of them. Maybe one of them. But I don't know. I never really got into DX. I have Link's Awakening and Link's Awakening DX. I bought 2 copies of the goddamn game, and just not that into it. I bought Breath of the Wild even. I got a decent way through that. Smile for the camera. I think I'm like 8 hours into that, but I don't know, not the game for me. And those are the only Legend of Zelda games that I've played. Death Mountain. Oh, 16 hours. Excuse me. And I'm sure they're fantastic games, and I should probably check out more of them. I hear that one on GameCube with the cartoony style. Oh, God, the name is escaping me. Someone's gonna say it, and I'm gonna be like, "Oh yeah, that's it. How could I forget that?" Um, Wind Waker. I hear that one's pretty good. I've been meaning to check that one out. Ha! I beat you, Val. um, yeah, it's on my list. I actually do have a Wii set up that I play my GameCube games on. That I was gonna cut up and put turn into a portable. But I don't know. I have no motivation to because I've played other Legend of Zelda games and I just never really got into it. Thoughts on the Mario Advance series? Um, like most of you guys, I'm sure, I played a shitload of Mario growing up. I played, what was the one on NES? Super Mario Advance 3? Not Super Mario Advance, Super Mario 3. Played the shit out of that, and I had a Super Nintendo growing up, and I played the shit out of Super Mario World. And it's probably nostalgia speaking, but Super Mario World is the best Mario, and I think that's like Super Mario 4 for Game Boy Advance or something like Super Mario 4 Advance, Super Mario World 3 or some bullshit. Some stupid name. But that's the best Mario game, and if you have a problem with that, you can go fuck your hat. I played the new one on the Wii. Yeah, basically the same thing. Um, just fancier graphics and more gimmicks. I've played Super Mario Odyssey, and that's actually pretty cool. Um, it didn't really wow me though. When I bought my Switch, it was used and it had a digital copy. But the person who sold me the Switch is like, I didn't realize that I can't sign into my new account while you're still signed in on the Switch. Can you please reset it? I'm like, sure, fine, whatever. Um, but that didn't stop me from playing it for a few days first. Uh, what's the other one? I played Super Mario Sunshine. That was a lot of fun. I never played Super Mario Galaxy. I meant to. I've heard good things, but just never got around to it. I. What am I forgetting? Super Mario 64. Never got into that one. Never liked it. Never liked the Mario Kart games either. Never could get into the ones before the Nintendo DS or Wii versions. Specifically Wii. I know there's one for GameCube, but I like the Wii version better. Before that, they're not worth it. Metroid. You're asking someone who primarily mods consoles at this point, doesn't actually play games. But I will say Metroid 2 on Game Boy has really cool cover art. I love the cover art on that. I'm sure it's a fantastic game. Never played it. I own 2 copies of it. uh, I don't know. There's one that came out, or actually, no, it didn't actually come out. There was one that was supposed to come out on GameCube or Wii. I don't actually remember. That one looked really cool, but that one got canceled, I think. I remember seeing a Hard 4 Games video on it really recently, where they had the prototype GameCube with the weird prototype Wii moats and shit, and they were playing it on that. That one looked cool. I was looking forward to that one back in the day. There were rumors about it. I don't remember if there was actually any footage or anything. Never actually played any of the Metroid games, though. I hear they're good, except for Other M. Wouldn't stop me from playing it, though. Will you add Bluetooth audio to Game Boy Advance SP? No, I have not, and I don't plan on it. I think Bluetooth audio is a waste of time. Alright, here's my view on audio on a Game Boy console. That's the best audio right there. Notice there's no sound. Alright, let's be real. I do genuinely still play Game Boy on occasion, but I'm only ever playing it when I'm not home. When I'm home, I'll just play computer games or Xbox or something. Better games. When I'm playing Game Boy, it's because I'm out and about, and this is the console that I brought with me. I don't want to play in public and I don't want to have to submit other people to my audio. And the audio is not good enough that I feel like I should bother with headphones. So just mute the damn thing. And yeah, if you really want to do Bluetooth, you should be aware that there is latency, and there's no getting around it. So I'm guessing you're talking about this ribbon cable. Any plans to go back and revise the AGS ribbon cable mod for more mods? Can't remember if you mentioned it. This thing, you can even see here that there's still unused solder pads. I never had any specific ideas as far as what to use those solder pads for. I just included them because there was very little meaningful difference between 12 and 9 as far as the PCB size and parts go. So, yeah, there's unused pads. If I ever think of something, then I'll use it. If not, then they'll just be unused. Have you ever played Pepsi Man? I've never even heard of Pepsi Man. Alright, guys. At this point, I'm actually genuinely going to go. I've cleaned up my desk at this point, so there's nothing more to do. Thank you for joining me. It's been a blast. It's been good. It's been good. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have. Let's do this again sometime, yeah? Thanks for watching, guys. Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Okay.